Isaac Newton foi talvez o cientista mais importante de todos os tempos.
Perhaps no scientist has ever worked so hard without regard for food, sleep, or human relations as Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton was a much darker figure. He was a loner. He was pathologically incapable of small talk.
We would use the term obsession. I would say he's the closest example I can think of someone who was consumed by his work.
He may also be the greatest scientist of all time. When he is born, the physical world is barely understood. Yet by the time he dies, he's worked out the precise laws that describe all motion, from the fall of an apple to the orbits of planets.
There just hasn't been another human being we know of quite like Newton.
In 1642, Isaac Newton is born in a remote English village. His childhood is an unhappy one. His father dies before he's born, and when he is just 3, his mother farms him out to a stern Puritan grandmother.
When his mother remarried and left him with his grandmother, Newton felt betrayed and isolated, and I think he never quite got over that.
He will later write that his childhood sins included threatening to burn his mother and stepfather in their house. Newton does not always do well in school, but he becomes a curiosity in his village for building extraordinary mechanical devices such as windmills. A schoolmaster convinces his mother to send him to university. At Trinity College, Cambridge, most students drink and carouse more than they study. Newton prefers to be isolated and alone.
Here, looking around him, were a lot of people who had not the least interest in books, who came from well-off families. He must have felt terribly out of place. And also, I suspect, knowing the way that students work, he must have been regarded as an oddball.
Newton, a Puritan, is obsessed with sin. He adopts strict emotional and sexual limits and lives a reclusive, monk-like existence.
Newton was so different from Galileo because Newton was one of the most private people that you would ever know about.
He didn't take pains to make friends, and somehow he didn't relate easily to people. He just pulled back from them.
Throughout his entire life, he has no love affairs and few friends. Some scholars speculate that Newton was homosexual. Others, that he simply decides he has no time for anything but work. It is believed he dies a virgin. In school, Newton pours all of his passion into his studies. Like Galileo, he's captivated by mathematics. He learns advanced math on his own. And then he begins to create a new mathematics to analyze motion. He invents calculus. Newton is fascinated by the way the sun rises and sets in an unbroken arc.
Newton's brilliant insight was the fact that when objects move, they can be viewed incrementally, piece by piece, tiny little increments at a time. And when you add up this motion, you get beautiful spirals, you get ellipses, you get circles. And just remember that when Isaac Newton was scribbling down all his notes, he was creating calculus at the rate at which freshmen in college learn it.
Had he told anyone, he would have been recognized as the greatest mathematician in Europe. But Newton keeps his discoveries to himself, preferring to work out the details alone. Several years later, at age 24, Newton is living in his mother's house. Here, he has an inspiration that will revolutionize all of physics. He will unlock the mystery of what makes the planets move.
Isaac Newton viewed the world pictorially, geometrically, and one day while walking down his estate, he saw an apple fall. And then he gazed up and he saw the moon. And then he asked the key question, the question that unlocked the secret of the heavens. If an apple falls, does the moon also fall? And then perhaps one of the greatest flashes of insight, he realized that gravity, which then takes an apple and makes it fall to the earth, is the same force that could grab the moon in the heavens, and make the moon fall around the earth.
While Galileo began the study of how gravity acts on Earth, Newton is the first to recognize that gravity also moves the planets and stars.
This was an absolutely world-shaking change. Newton essentially showed that the laws of the heavens were the same as the law. Newton essentially showed that the laws of the heavens were the same as the laws down here on Earth.
But when he tries to work out the details, the complex mathematics eludes him. He will keep his great breakthrough to himself for almost 20 years. Newton soon becomes a professor of mathematics at Cambridge University. With few teaching responsibilities, he works on math and physics around the clock. His colleagues will soon recognize his brilliance, as well as his prickly and strange nature. In 1672, Newton's invention of a new telescope wins him admission to the Royal Society, England's association of greatest scientists. Flattered, Newton allows them to publish a brilliant paper on optics. But when the great physicist, Robert Hooke, erroneously challenges his theory, Newton flies into a rage and threatens to withdraw from the Royal Society.
His reaction to criticism is almost always to carefully explain why what the other person has just said is out and out foolish.
He was an extraordinarily fragile personality. As one of his biographers had said, his motto is rule or sulk, and he spent a lot of time sulking.
Some historians speculate that Newton's vindictiveness, inordinate sensitivity to criticism, and obsessive work reveal symptoms of a mental illness such as manic depression. We will never know. If he does have a mental illness, it does not slow him down. At the age of 42, Newton is asked to solve a problem that is baffling England's greatest physicists. What mathematics describes the orbit of planets around the sun? Seized by inspiration, Newton shuts his door and begins work on his greatest masterpiece. Like Galileo, he is guided by strong intuition. Now, he sets out to crack the complex mathematics of gravity that he began years earlier. For almost 2 years, he communicates with almost no one. His only form of exercise is pacing.
He would sleep very little, that he would work 18, 20 hours a day, that he would skip meals and simply write.
He had the power to sit in his chair undistracted, focusing, obsessed with one problem for years at a time until it finally cracked.
At last, Newton re-emerges with a masterpiece that will change the world. The Principia. A ruthless simplifier, Newton strikes at the fundamentals. He uncovers how mass interacts with force, inertia, and acceleration. But his greatest insight is to define gravity. He is the first to call gravity a force acting at a distance. And through breathtaking mathematical breakthroughs, Newton lays out the precise laws that determine the motion of all objects.
Newton's Principia, published in 1687, was a scientific revolution. In it, Newton gave the first precise description of the laws that govern the motion of bodies, from cannonballs to planets.
When you look at the Principia and the number of mathematical problems solved in it, doing that in an 18-month period, this is not a normal human being in any sense of the word.
Mas ele não mede palavras na hora de definir o lugar de Newton entre as grandes cabeças da humanidade.
Newton, I think, was really the greatest scientific intellect.
Na minha opinião, diz ele, Newton foi o grande intelectual da ciência nos últimos 1000 anos.